Did you know that at the very heart of the story about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, there's a fascinating structure that reveals God's character and his desire to save? Let's check it out on this episode of Masterpiece. Hey, welcome to another Masterpiece episode. My name is Chris, and I want to help you take your Bible study experience to the next level and discover just how beautiful and fascinating this book really is. If you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by, and of course, make sure you hit that subscribe button and activate the bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming exciting episodes. And if you find the video helpful, remember to give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone you think might also benefit from it. Alright, so let's get right into it, and just like in the last few episodes, we're once again going to go to the book of Genesis. If you've been following this channel, you know that in our last episode we looked at the genealogies in Genesis 4 and 5. If you missed that episode, check it out right up here. So we've been to Genesis 4 and 5. This time we're going to go more towards the middle of the book, to a story you've probably heard about before, and that's the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19. So, Genesis 19, Genesis chapter 19. Now obviously this is in many ways a very sad and tragic story, and yet even in a story like this we can find beauty, both in the design of the text as well as in the message. So let's take a closer look. So as you may know, this chapter begins with two angels in human form coming to Sodom in the evening. Lot, the nephew of Abraham, who is living in Sodom, is sitting in the gate of the city, and when he sees the visitors, he invites them to his house to spend the night and makes a meal for them. So they're in his house, eating together, and then it says that before they're even able to retire for the night, the men of Sodom come to the house, they surround the house, they call for Lot, and they say to him, "Hey, where are these men who came to you tonight? Bring them out so that we may know them," which basically means we want to have sex with them. Okay, so notice, here we have men who talk with Lot, they ask a question about people who are associated with him, and then they say, "Bring them out." Keep that in mind, we'll come back to it in just a second. So they call for Lot, and according to verse 6, he goes out to them and basically tries to convince them not to do such a wicked thing. He even offers his own virgin daughters to them, but they're not interested. In fact, they get angry and start to attack Lot and try to break open the door of the house, and who knows what would have happened if the angels hadn't pulled Lot back into the house. They lock the door and they strike the men of Sodom with blindness so they can't find the entrance of the house. And then we get to verse 12, which says, "Then the men said to Lot, 'Whom else have you here? A son-in-law? And your sons and your daughters? And whoever you have in the city, bring them out of the place.'" Did you catch it? So we once again have men, in this case the angels, talking with Lot. They ask a question about people who are associated with him, and then they say, "Bring them out." Interesting. But what's even more interesting is that this is not the only parallel in this story. In fact, if you look closely, you can see that at the very heart of the story, you have two scenes associated with Lot's house that are quite similar and at the same time very different. So at the beginning of the first scene, Lot has just brought the men into his house. Then the men of Sodom come, they talk with Lot. First they ask a question, then they say, "Bring out." So Lot goes out to them. He tries to convince the men of Sodom to not do what they planned, but instead to take his daughters, but he's not successful. The men of Sodom get angry. It says they press hard against Lot, but he's rescued by the angels who stretch out their hand and pull him into the house. So that's the first scene. Now in the second scene, we have the men who have just brought Lot into the house. And as we already noted, now they talk with Lot, and just like the men of Sodom, they ask him a question, and they say, "Bring out." So what does Lot do? Just like in the first scene, he goes out and tries to convince his sons-in-law, who were to take his daughters, to do something, but once again, he's not successful, because they think he's joking. And then it says in verse 15 that the angels urge Lot to leave the city, and when he hesitates, they take him and his wife and his daughters by the hand, and they lead them out of the city. Isn't that fascinating? Right in the middle of this story, we have two scenes that progress in a very similar way, which obviously raises the question, why? Why is it written the way it's written? In other words, why has the author chosen to arrange the text in this particular way? Now, as always, there are several reasons we could talk about, but in this video, I want to just focus on one of them, which is that this arrangement highlights the contrast between the men of Sodom and the visitors. Notice, both groups are called men, both talk with Lot, both ask a question regarding people that are associated with Lot, and both want him to bring these people out. So those are the parallels, but there's also striking differences, and the reason is the very different attitude the two groups of men have. Just look at the men of Sodom. In a culture where hospitality plays a huge role, they don't care one bit about the well-being of these visitors to their city. Instead, they're ready to abuse these people in what would basically have been a gang rape, just to satisfy their own sinful desires. And when Lot tries to reason with them that they shouldn't do something so wicked, they get angry and resort to violence in order to get what they want. In other words, they're completely selfish and depraved, and this becomes even more evident when you compare them with the other men in this story. These men are also interested in people who are associated with Lot, not because they want to abuse them, but because they want to save them. In fact, throughout the entire story, these men are trying to save people from destruction and death, which means they're not focused on themselves, but on others. Yes, they've been sent by God to destroy the city, but they're trying to save as many as possible. They don't press Lot in order to harm him like the men of Sodom do. They press him, they urge him so that he will not be harmed. And when he still hesitates, they take him and his family by the hand and lead them out of the city that they may live. Which means this is not just a story about sin and destruction. It's also a story about mercy and salvation. Because that's what God is like, always trying to save. Which is why he didn't just send messengers to Sodom. He also sent his own son to this earth full of sin and depravity. And when the hostile mob surrounded him, he died. He took the judgment upon himself so that all who take him in and believe his word can be saved from destruction and death. What an amazing God. So is that all there is to say about this little parallel panel structure in Genesis 19? Well, you know the answer. Of course not. So if you have any additional thoughts on this, or if you've noticed something else here that you want to share, let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. I hope the video has been helpful to you and that it motivates you to dig deeper into the Bible and discover really cool things in this book. All I can say is it's really, really worth it. So give it a try. And if you need some help, check out our brand new website at masterpiece.bible for some free resources. God bless you as you study His Word, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.